The big news this morning, breaking as we speak, is that AFL CEO Gillon McLachlan is expected to announce his resignation from the role at a media conference at 11:30 today. Joining us, you can't keep a good man down, Gerard Whateley. Gerard, good morning.
Kane, don't take a day off.
No,
I should know by now.
What? You're supposed to be on holidays, Gerard.
I'm sitting here trying to do this morning's Wordle and listening to you and Bucks, and at 9:30 came a media alert from the AFL. There's a little rule of thumb: the blander the alert, the more significant the announcement. So that was slated for 11:30 with the chairman Richard Goyder and the chief executive Gillon McLachlan. And my memory of Andrew Demetriou's is exactly the same, a very bland media alert for a press conference in a couple of hours' time. The presidents and the chief executives were asked to join a snap hookup at 10:30, so in 10 minutes' time, and then the all-staff meeting has been called at the AFL for 11 o'clock. So a few planks to put in place to tell the presidents and the chief executives, then to tell the staff, and then to make the public announcement that Gillon McLachlan will see out the end of the season, but that will be his time as the AFL's chief executive finished.
Why now?
I don't think it's a great surprise that this would be his last season. I think coming into the pandemic, there was a strong feeling that McLachlan felt that his work was nearing its end, and then a whole new set of circumstances arose, and his pledge to the chairman was to lead the game through the pandemic. So we would forecast that by the end of this season, whatever COVID normal is going to be for all of society and for sport will be well established. So it seems like a natural end point. The television rights were extended at the outset of the pandemic through to the end of 2024. So they might start that process before McLachlan leaves, but I doubt that that's going to be his project to run to fruition. So I feel like this was... to guide the game through the pandemic was going to be his last major task, and a bit of forecasting that probably ends at the closure of this season.
So who's in the frame, Gerard?
Yeah, so I'm always a little bit careful with this, although the chief executive is a smaller field than, we never get the coaching appointments right the next day, so I often wonder about the worth of that. So internally, I feel like the candidate that they have settled on is Travis Olds, who will be pushed up internally as the natural successor within the executive. Now, I don't dismiss Andrew Dillon, and I'm not absolutely saying my information's right, but I feel like late last year there was a move toward Travis Old being the internal candidate. So they're the two best qualified internally. And then the curiosity is, what is the place of Brendan Gale in the scheme of things? So he's been the chief executive of the Players Association. He interviewed for this job 8 years ago. And since then, he has led Richmond back to the glory years. And there's no man more qualified in clubland to be the next chief executive of the league than Brendan Gale. What the frictions are between the AFL and Gale, between the AFL and Richmond across the years, are not publicly declared. So there's been there have been simmering tensions behind the scenes. That's everyone will deny it publicly, but we all know that to be true. But whether that plays a role against him for the job, I simply don't know. But I would say your three football candidates are Travis Old, Andrew Dillon, and Brendan Gale, and then I have no doubt that there'll be a more extensive process around the rest of sport and around the business community to see who else might be interested and qualified to take one of the most high-profile jobs in Australian public life, never mind sport.
Gerard Whateley is with us because Gillon McLachlan is about to step down at season's end. The AFL will hold a media conference at 11:30 today. What will his legacy be, Gerard?
Yeah, I think it's twofold. It's leading the game through the pandemic, which was unforeseen, and then the most dramatic phase that the game had faced in many a year. It was depicted as a grave threat. The set of press conferences that McLachlan did, so first shortening the season, then starting that 2020 season, then halting it in the middle of Sunday of the first round, the declaration of when to return to play, the stitching up of the finances behind the scene to borrow against Marvel Stadium, which his administration had very cleverly purchased well ahead of time and was a financial lifeline, the likes of which wouldn't have been imagined but had been planned for. Getting the game back on, 2 grand finals outside Victoria at the Gabba and at Optus Stadium in Perth, and the game made it. So if we were going to boil it down simply, from the threat that the game faced when it couldn't be played, which was a scenario that really nobody in sport had foreseen, had done the damage control or the chaos planning for, was that the games simply couldn't be staged. And then when they couldn't be staged in anybody. So principally, sort of against any expectation, McLachlan's legacy will live in guiding the game through the pandemic and doing it exceptionally well. And then I think the second fold will be fast-tracking the AFLW, which was a project that I'm not sure the AFL quite knew how to attack, and McLachlan just went headlong into it to get it started. And he will likely leave. If the next season is played in August, there will be 18 AFLW teams partaking in that, and he will leave the month after. So he will have got that competition started, and he will have got it to the full set of teams before he leaves office. So much of the work that he'd done prior to that as the 2IC, he did all the grunt work on the expansion teams, Gold Coast and GWS, and all the stadium work around that. But his time as the chief executive, I think, will be defined as leading the game through the pandemic incredibly well, and with tremendous strength and foresight, and building AFLW to the point where all 18 clubs are on the field.
And before we let you go, what are there a couple of the challenges for the incoming CEO? Clearly, expansion will be a big one.
So the timing will be really interesting, Kane, is I suspect the Tasmanian vote happens under McLachlan's watch. So maybe that's the last piece of what he does. So if they are able to come together with the bid, which I think is compelling, to pull together the presidents to take a visionary vote rather than a short-term vote, and the awarding of a 19th licence, it could very well be that that's McLachlan's final piece. So he hands that over to the next leader. And it'll be a runway that probably runs to 2028. So it's a long lead time. But that will be an active project, I think. The new chief executive will inherit the vote to bring Tasmania in, and then they'll have 6 years to make it functional and successful on day one. The television rights are always, it's probably the biggest brief that the chief executive has each 5 years to make sure that the money is there for the game, because the television rights in the AFL fund everything. And a world that is fragmenting. So whether that's still the traditional free-to-air and the pay TV, so a mixture of Channel 7 and Fox Footy, where KO sits in that, where another free-to-air might sit, and whether the Australian market is advanced enough for a player like Amazon for the following TV rights. So what will it be? It'll be 2023, essentially, when that new chief executive comes in, and that will be the year of the major negotiation for the next contract. And then and the AFLW, the second phase, so the foundation phase finishes when all 18 are played, but there needs to be a long-term vision. Where does it get to? What does it look like? Is it a winter game? How does it sit complementary to the men's competition? That will be the second phase, I think, will land right in front of the new chief executive.